While it may seem simple on the surface, Dead by Daylight can often quickly become overwhelming to new players. That's why I've compiled this Survivor Guide with several beginner and intermediate tips to help you accelerate your learning curve and survive longer out there in the fog. We'll be using a lot of terminology that is unique to the game, so if you're new to the game and haven't watched my video on Dead by Daylight terminology, I'd recommend that you watch that first and then come back to this one. The link to that will be in the description. Timestamps for this video will also be in the description in case you want to jump around to the various tips. Let's talk first about objectives. As their primary objective, the team of 4 survivors must finish repairing 5 of the 7 generators on the map in order to power the 2 exit gates. Once the exit gates are powered, survivors must activate the exit gate switches to open the gates and escape. A hatch will also spawn when there is 1 survivor left alive in the trial, providing a secondary means of escape. The killer, meanwhile, seeks to prevent survivors from escaping the trial by hooking and sacrificing them to the entity. Or as the tutorial will tell you,
your survival in the trial may be hindered by a murderous killer. Maybe. I'm pretty sure that's the point of the game.
Tip number 1, be productive. When you are first starting out, it can be a little overwhelming and you may be tempted to spend much of your time sneaking around and hiding. However, every second matters in the game, so keep in mind that any time you spend doing something other than working on generators also increases the time it takes to escape, while simultaneously increasing the time the killer has to hunt you and your team down and sacrifice you all. Therefore, it's best to make every second count as much as possible. So if you're not working on a generator, make sure that you're doing something else critical to your objective, like unhooking or healing teammates, cleansing or blessing totems, or looping the killer to buy time for other survivors to work on gens. With that in mind, make sure that you don't just scatter whenever you hear the killer's terror radius approaching. Instead, pan your camera around, and if you see the killer already committed in a chase, it is often more profitable to keep working on that gen rather than running away and losing precious seconds while you try to find another gen to work on. Tip number 2, how to locate generators. Since we've determined that working on generators is perhaps the most important thing you can be doing at any given moment while not being chased, one of the things that can trip you up most in completing your objective is struggling to find where the generators are located. To easily find generators on outdoor maps, look up. You can often spot gen locations when you find the light poles that extend above them. The more active the lights are, the further along that generator is in its repair. If all the lights are fully on, then that generator has already been repaired fully and you need to find another one. Indoor maps can pose an additional challenge while trying to find generators tucked away in small rooms. Keep your eyes out for rooms with flickering lights or signs. This will indicate that there is a generator inside still in need of repair. Tip number 3, camera panning. Survivors experience the game in third person, giving them a wide field of view and are also able to pan their camera 360 degrees. This gives them an advantage over killers who play in first person with a more limited field of view. Keep this in mind as you are attempting to evade the killer so you can use their limited field of view against them. It may be tempting to keep your camera locked in front of you so that you can see where you are going, but force yourself to practice panning the camera behind you as much as possible so that you can keep track of where the killer is in relation to you. This information you gain from learning this skill will be incredibly valuable so that you know when to drop pallets, when you've broken line of sight, how the killer might be trying to mind game you, etc. It is also important to pan your camera around while you are working on generators so that you can spot the killer approaching. I can't tell you how many times I've caught survivors off guard because they're not looking around them while working on a generator. Tip number 4, play killer. This may seem counterintuitive, however, the best way to beat your enemy is to understand your enemy. Learning to play the game as killer does multiple things for you. First, it helps you learn how other survivors play the game, both the good and the bad. As you play, pay attention to what other survivors do to both loop and mind game you. Keep those things in mind and practice the same things when you switch back to survivor. The flip side is also true. Watch for mistakes that the survivors make that make it easier for you as the killer. Remember those things and make sure not to do them when switching back to survivor. By playing as killer, you also get to see things from the killer's perspective, namely the scratch marks that are left behind for a short time whenever a survivor runs. These are an easy way for the killer to track a survivor's location, and you don't see these when you're playing as survivor unless you are running the perk self-aware. When starting out, it can be easy to forget this, run into a hiding spot only to have the killer run straight to you, leaving you to wonder how they did that.
Oh, what? This guy's gotta be hacking. He just ran right up to the locker and pulled me right out of it like he knew I was there.
Or maybe the killer just saw your scratch marks leading up to the locker and that's how they found you. Huh. Yeah, that does make sense. Learn how to track survivors as the killer using their scratch marks, and then remember what that looks like when playing as survivor. Additionally, playing as killer teaches you about the strengths and weaknesses of the killer in general. You get to see the game from the first-person perspective, experience the blind spots, and then have a frame of reference to use that against the killer when you're back on survivor. You get a feel for how the blade wipe or missed attack animations affect and slow down the killer so you can better capitalize on the time that buys you. Playing as killer will also cue you into the strengths and weaknesses of that specific killer, so that you can use those to counter them whenever you face the killer yourself. Tip number 5, use resources wisely. Something I see a lot of new survivors do, and I've been guilty of this too, is throwing pallets way too early. Pallets are valuable and limited resource. Once they are destroyed by the killer, they're gone for good. You can often turn a short chase into a longer loop by waiting to throw pallets until the killer is right on top of you. Doing this will not only make the killer have to break the pallet or walk around it, but it will also stun the killer for an extra 2 seconds, buying you valuable time to make distance. 2 seconds may not seem like a lot, but it will buy you precious time that you need to extend or even escape the chase altogether. Remember, the longer you are being chased, the more time your team has to work on gens, so use pallets wisely to extend chases as much as possible. Tip number 6, using time on the hook. The first hook state will last 60 seconds by default, during which time you will have the option to attempt an escape. However, unless there are other perks or offerings in play, you will only have a 4% chance of success at this. Each failed attempt will accelerate your first hook state considerably, so it's best to use this only in situations where being rescued by your teammates is not likely. When you're hooked the second time, or your first hook state passes the 60-second mark, you will start the second hook state, or the struggle state. During this time, you will begin to struggle against the entity, facing multiple skill checks along the way. You will not be able to attempt an escape yourself. This stage will also last a full 60 seconds should you be successful in all your skill checks, but failing a skill check will result in time lost off your second hook. Once you reach your third hook, or the third hook stage, you will be sacrificed to the entity. During your time playing Dead by Daylight, you're likely going to run into the occasional killer who camps the hook, especially when you're just starting out. Now, this can be incredibly frustrating because if they're truly camping the hook, it can be nearly impossible for your teammates to rescue you, which can lead to 2 minutes of you just hanging there watching everybody else play the game. While it may be tempting in this scenario to purposely attempt the 4% chance of escape and intentionally fail skill checks in order to accelerate your hook timer so that you can just be done with the trial and move on to the next one. This actually hurts your team because it frees up the killer then to begin putting pressure on your teammates, likely getting another down and camping another hook. And all this does is reinforce in that killer's mind that camping is a viable strategy that works. Remember what I said earlier about being productive at all times. When you are getting camped, try to remember that any time they spend camping you, they're not chasing your teammates, and they will have free time to work on generators without pressure. A good team will punish a killer who camps the hook by ensuring that they only get a 1K. Being camped sucks, but I recommend that you embrace the suck and give your team the best possible chance of survival. Also, don't entirely lose hope either. Sometimes good teammates will be able to pull off a miraculous save. Tip number 7, relax. Dead by Daylight can be stressful to play at first, and even overwhelming at times until you get your feet under you. My biggest advice is to just relax, enjoy the ride, try to learn as much as you can from every trial and every failure, and over time you will get better and the game will get easier. Okay, maybe not easier. But in all seriousness, when you are starting out, don't make your primary objective to survive. Make it your primary objective to learn and get better. You won't get better at chases by hiding from the killer. Recognize that you will struggle for a little while as you learn, and the most important part is that you are learning. Tip number 8, watch and listen. Part of relaxing is remembering to keep your eyes and ears open at all times. Watch for things that will give you valuable information in the game. Use the red stain to determine where the killer is looking. When you are not the obsession, watch the entity claws around the obsession to know when that survivor is being chased. If the claws wiggle, the killer is actively chasing that survivor, and you know you will likely have time to work on gens. When you are the one being chased, keep your eyes out for generators and other points of interest that you probably don't want to lead the killer to. It's always frustrating when you're working away at a gen and the person being chased leads the killer right to you, forcing you to hop off, and now there are 2 survivors not working on gens and running around. So do your best to lead the killer away from where your fellow survivors are working. A great place to lead killers is to the area where gens are already fully repaired. When the final generator is completed, the auras of the exit gate switches will be revealed for a few seconds. Always take a moment to orient yourself to where these are because they're easy to lose track of if you're not paying attention. When there is one survivor left alive in the trial, either because the others have been killed or escaped, a hatch will spawn and open. Watch and listen for it because it can be a quick means of escape. Watch the number of pistons firing on a generator for a quick read on how far along the repair is. Each of the 4 pistons represent about 25% of the progress. For example, if a generator has 2 pistons firing, then it's roughly at 50% repair. Listen out for generators that are near completion or have other survivors working on them. If you hear a clunking sound, there's a survivor working on that gen and you can join them to increase the speed of that repair, or you can split off to find another gen to spread your team out. Listen for the killer's terror radius, which causes your survivor's heartbeat to beat louder and faster as the killer gets closer. Since the heartbeat belongs to your survivor, the sound it makes is not directional, so you need to pan your camera around and watch for evidence of the killer's location, like the red stain. Now let's talk about a good starting survivor. This is going to assume that you only have the base game and none of the DLC characters yet. Of the starting survivors, my top choice for beginners is Meg. This is very subjective, of course, and you may want to read through each survivor's starting perks to decide which one is best for you, but I find that Meg has some very powerful perks that are also very beginner friendly as well. Meg has the perks Quick and Quiet, Sprint Burst, and Adrenaline. Quick and Quiet makes it so that when you perform a rushed vault or rush into a locker, it does not trigger trigger a noise notification to the killer, and the in-game sounds are also suppressed. Sprint Burst allows you to run at 150% of your normal speed for 3 seconds, but it will cause you to be exhausted for a short period of time, preventing you from using the perk again until the exhausted status effect wears off. This is great for making distance between you and the killer. The tricky part about this perk is that when it's ready, it will trigger as soon as you run for any reason, so just make sure you walk until you need the Sprint Burst. Finally, Meg has the perk Adrenaline, which makes it so that when the exit gates are powered, you immediately heal 1 health state. So if you are injured, you become healthy, and if you are dying, you automatically get picked up. In addition, you get a Sprint Burst allowing you to run at 150% your normal speed for 5 seconds. So this is why I recommend starting with Meg and running her 3 base perks as soon as you have more perk slots unlocked. Speaking of which, my final tip is I highly recommend you doing the tutorials, because they will reward you with 100,000 blood points, allowing you to jumpstart leveling up one of your character's blood webs. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this guide. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something from that. If you found this information helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a like and commented down below. And please consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content like this from me in the future. Good luck in your trials out there in the fog. Now, before you go, here are 2 other videos of mine, one of which I think you would like, the other one YouTube thinks you would like. So why don't you watch both and let me know which one of us did it better. With that said, you're awesome, stay awesome, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.